These are the 12 weakest curse techniques in Jujutsu Kaisen. And even though they seem to lack power and strength, these abilities are possessed by powerful users who have maxed them out to their full potential. Or maybe they don't actually need them at all. Like Mei, who became a grade 1 sorcerer barely relying on her black bird manipulation, all thanks to her overwhelming strength. Even one of the big 3 families had a weak curse technique that just acted like a weapon extension. Sukuna was just one of the few who possessed a relatively weak curse technique but was able to unleash the powers beyond its limits, the Divine Flame. It's actually a huge surprise that aside from the OP slashing powers of Sukuna's Cleave and Dismantle, the King of Curses has another technique up his sleeve. But compared to Cleave and Dismantle, Sukuna's firebending abilities are pretty weak. It was even said that his flames aren't very fast, and the effective range of the technique is a bit short, but that didn't stop Sukuna from using this power. His mastery of Jujutsu and smart tactics turned the tables for his technique. Like he made a series of conditions and binding vows to unleash the full potential of Divine Flame. First, Sukuna must use Dismantle and then Cleave. Second, since his flames are basically weak, he used a binding vow to crank up their power. Sukuna can't use this move if he's outnumbered. Meaning, Divine Flame is basically just for one-on-one fights, like when Sukuna fought and even overpowered Jogo's flames back in Shibuya. Well, that is the case unless Malevolent Shrine is up and open. When Sukuna's domain is active, he can use Divine Flame even if he's outnumbered. This binding vow also lets Sukuna expand Malevolent Shrine's power, making anything he shatters inside his domain blow up with cursed energy. Is it just me, or are these binding vows kind of like excuses or something, you know? I mean, we haven't really seen what happens if these vows are broken. So they're just like instant power-ups. What do you think? In chapter 259, Sukuna switched up the conditions of his domain even more, turning Divine Flame into a freaking atomic bomb that literally burned everything with life in the domain's range to ashes. Bro, Chozo was killed and almost got cremated right then and there after he saved Yuji. Our boy might have even broken down after his big bro died in front of him. Luckily, his other brother, Todo, arrived just in time to support Yuji in the fight against Sukuna. Todo's Boogie Woogie is also another weak curse technique, in the hands of a strong sorcerer like him. With Boogie Woogie, Todo can easily mess with the battlefield just by clapping his hands. He can instantly swap places with anyone, or make 2 others switch spots as long as they've got enough cursed energy. Now don't get me wrong, I know this technique can really be annoying, but generally speaking, it isn't an ace card ability. Like it doesn't have any finishing moves or powerful attacks at all. Instead, Boogie Woogie works like a wild card that relies on Todo's strength and skills. Because if Todo isn't powerful, he would just clap around everywhere without doing any serious damage to his target, right? But you see, Todo's skills are top notch. Aside from his jacked body, he's also extremely fast. That's why he can use his curse technique so well. Against Hanami and Mahito, he showcased his strength and abilities while teaching and supporting Yuji at the same time. Todo is so tough that he could even tank Sukuna's powerful punches. Because of this, he was even recognized by Sukuna himself as a real deal sorcerer. Don't you just love a guy who, is not gifted with like the right family and all those things, but just finds a way to make it to the top? This dog reached grade 1 status even without a sorcerer family background and while still being a student from Kyoto Jujutsu High. And in case you don't know, Todo reached this level after being mentored very harshly by one of the special grade sorcerers, Yuki Tsukumo. Under her wing, Todo even learned to use simple domain technique. When Todo lost his left hand in the fight against Mahito, he attached a Vibra Slap, which is basically an instrument that Todo could use so that he could activate Boogie Woogie version 2.0. With Vibra Slap, he can now perform up to 50 insane swaps per second. Some guys be like, oh, I wish I had that at night when I'm on blankvideos.com. And to fully maximize the new version of this technique, Todo entered a binding vow that would limit the swaps he could make to expand the range of his Boogie Woogie. When Todo entered the battle against Sukuna, he planned to save fellow sorcerers trapped within Sukuna's domain by teaming up with Miss Mei and using Boogie Woogie on her crows, basically like Naruto's Kawarami no Jutsu, aka body replacement technique, switching the crows and the sorcerer's positions. By the way, I just noticed Todo and Mei call each other Mr. Todo and Miss Mei. Anyways, moving on, it's not like Mei's innate ability is some super powerful technique. Even Mei doesn't usually rely on her curse technique, Blackbird manipulation, like I said earlier. She usually uses her crows like feathered drones to gather intel and perform surveillance tasks. And that's pretty much it. Mei herself even said that because of her weak technique, she trained so hard so that she would still be effective even without a curse technique. And that's why she's buffed. With just her brute strength and a massive axe, Mei easily trashed Niji Ebina, a curse user who could have been at a semi-grade 1 level. Maybe trained to the point where she hit the limits of her body. So she shifted her focus back to her curse technique and also leveled it up. Like, yo, this girl's a legit gym rat. Because of this, she was able to unlock an insane ability of her blackbird manipulation, Bird Strike. Using a binding vow on the crow, she forces it to commit suicide by diving straight at the target with a deadly blow, surpassing the crow's cursed energy limits. Only powerful sorcerers like Gojo, Kenjaku, and Sukuna were able to survive the kamikaze attack. It seems like binding vows are like the go-to recipe for boosting weak techniques, you know? First it was Sukuna and Todo, now there's Mei. But it's not just Todo and Mei who are top-tier grade 1 sorcerers with not so powerful curse techniques. There's also Kento Nanami and his ratio technique. Nanami is basically a textbook grade 1 sorcerer. I mean, he had exceptional hand-to-hand combat and swordsmanship skills with his blunt blade. And with these abilities, his ratio technique definitely fits his aggro. During combat, he could perfectly execute strategies and attacks that could even hold up against special grades like Mahito. By marking the target with precise lines, Nanami could land a critical blow if he hits the sweet, weak spot located at the perfect 7-to-3 ratio. This technique allows him to easily slice through even the toughest targets. It may seem like a powerful ability, but let me break it down for you, bro. As you can see, the ratio technique serves primarily as a marker. But even though it can mark the target, it still depends on whether the user can land a hit on the weak spot. Also, since it's a critical hit, it almost works like a multiplier. Meaning, if the user doesn't have enough strength, the multiplier for the critical hit wouldn't even matter. If you guys aren't convinced, just look at the difference between Nanami himself and Ino, who took Nanami's blunt blade that was eventually imbued with the ratio technique. Even though Nanami and Ino both use a technique, Nanami's attacks definitely had more power and precision in it, drawing out the full potential of his innate ability. Arguably one of the simplest and powerless curse techniques was Kenjaku's brain transplant. You might say that if Kenjaku was a top-tier sorcerer, how come his curse technique is considered weak? Well, essentially, his curse technique is just transferring to another body like a parasite. Brain transplant lets him swap bodies with anyone by literally transferring his brain into his targets, even the dead ones. He was probably sneaking into morgues, waiting for a body he could use. You know, just like what he did when he took Geto's body right after Gojo's best bro died. In its basic form, brain transplant was pretty weak since Kenjaku mostly relied on the strength and abilities of his host, and it didn't have anything special at all. But that didn't stop him from becoming one of the strongest and most evil sorcerers in history. With his cunning personality and being one of the smartest sorcerers, like bro, he literally has the brains, he became one of the most powerful sorcerers of all time. That's all because of how he maxed the potential of his innate ability. What made brain transplant terrifying was the curse techniques he could access after taking over a new host. Once he was in a new body, Kenjaku gained access to their curse energy, techniques, and even their memories, like when Kenjaku used Noritoshi Kamo and even used blood manipulation in his experiments to create death paintings. Now, I was just thinking, since Kamo was considered the most evil sorcerer, was that before or after Kenjaku took over? Maybe no one will ever know, because Kenjaku could also keep his identity hidden, even from the Gojo family's 6 eyes. Like when Gojo was confused after he saw his dead best bro standing in front of him. Brain transplant allowed Kenjaku to survive for 1,000 years and become literally immortal by hopping from body to body. But did you know that Kenjaku's brain was actually his real brain? Like, how was it able to exist for 1,000 years? And why does it have goddamn teeth? Since he can use reverse curse technique, can this prevent him from aging? Like by just continuously making fresher cells in the body? The teeth on Kenjaku's brain were somehow bearable since they were pretty much covered. But what really takes me off is that he didn't heal the nasty scars on his skull because of a binding vow. Like Kenjaku just stitched them up even though he could use reverse curse technique. Plot armor. Just like Kenjaku, another powerhouse sorcerer, even considered a special grade, Yuta Kotsu, also has a weak curse technique. Copy. You might not believe this, but here's why. Yuta's innate ability heavily relies on Rika. Without her, having copy might not even be worth it. So let's see what happens if Rika is out of the picture and Yuta's technique has to stand on its own. First of all, the brain can only handle about 3 to 4 curse techniques. Meaning even though Yuta can have as many curse techniques as he wants with copy, he can only store a few without Rika. That may seem acceptable, especially if Yuta can copy 4 god tier techniques, for example like curse spirit manipulation, idol transfiguration, or even the 10 shadows. But actually before Yuta could even copy these OP curse techniques, Rika needs to consume a part of the user's body. So if she's out of the picture, Yuta would have to consume the body part himself? Gross. Yuji was the only crazy one to donate a finger because, of course, they were fighting against Sukuna, and they used our boy's finger as a bluff for consuming Sukuna's finger. Well, aside from Yuji, Charles Bernard also gave Yuta part of his ribs, but Hakari can be a bit pushy, which is probably why Charles had no chance. Also, Copy relies on Rika's unlimited pool of cursed energy. Without Rika, Yuta wouldn't even last the 5-minute connection when using Copy and Rika's full manifestation. For example, when Yuta was in Gojo's body, he eventually collapsed after exhausting his cursed energy from using Kenjaku's curse technique and spamming Gojo Sensei's technique, even though he hadn't reached the time limit yet. What I'm saying is, Copy itself doesn't actually do much. If it were someone else's innate ability, or if Yuta didn't have Rika, it could be a different story, but it still wouldn't be as effective as when Yuta and Rika use it. Yuta is just a top-notch sorcerer who can even use the complex Limitless technique. And without Rika acting as a storage and an unlimited source of curse energy, Copy likely wouldn't be worth it. So it's possible that there's actually a sort of Shikigami that comes with the technique. I mean, Yuta might come from a prestigious Jujutsu clan, so his technique must be a prized technique. This theory even suggests that Rika actually became the Shikigami of Yuta's curse technique. Basically, there's a Shikigami that works as a storage for the Copy's techniques, and also as a source of curse energy. When Rika entered Yuta's life, she may have merged with the Shikigami after escaping the curse brought on by Yuta himself. Another Tokyo High survivor who also made the cut is Kenji Hakari, my favorite. With his pachinko-themed technique, Private Pure Love Train, Hakari's curse technique primarily manifests in his domain expansion, Idle Death Gamble. To make it simple, when Hakari hits the jackpot, he enters unkillable mode, granting him unlimited curse energy for 4 minutes and 11 seconds, the exact length of Admiring You, which is Private Pure Love Train's theme song. During this time, his body automatically heals any injury, making Hakari nearly invincible. It's a crazy technique that perfectly fits Hakari's so-called fever, because even though the chances of hitting the jackpot are only about 1 out of 239, Hakari's luck never runs out. And he even scored a huge win against a powerful sorcerer, Hajime Kashimo. But if you think about it, luck and pure strength are actually what make this technique strong. Without them, it's basically weak. For example, Hakari needs to hold his own while waiting for a jackpot. When he fought Kashimo, bro almost died multiple times. This means his technique works like a wild card. If Hakari hits the jackpot, it's all good, but if he doesn't enter unkillable mode, it means death against a powerful enemy. And it's not like unkillable mode is like a legit god tier ability. I mean, the user could hit the jackpot, but if he doesn't have the skills, the temporary immortality given by the jackpot might as well be useless. You know, like against Sukuna's slashing techniques, the user might end up like ground meat over and over again, right? Private Pure Love Train might sound overpowered, but that's mostly due to Hakari's extreme luck and power. Plus, according to Yuta, if Hakari's in the zone, his senpai might even be stronger than a special grade sorcerer. Because of Hakari's modern take on Jujutsu, his curse technique and domain are actually kinda hated by the higher-ups, like Kyoto High's principal, Yoshinobu Gakuganji. Though it's a bit confusing because Grandpa uses an electric guitar for his curse technique. So how's that an exception? Old man Gakuganji's technique literally makes his body work like an amplifier. It blasts waves of curse energy that attack his target when Gakuganji shreds solos on his Gibson Flying 5 guitar. He does look like a badass grandpa. But you see, since it works just like a sound system, it doesn't have any power output on its own. It works like a multiplier that heavily relies on the user's capabilities. So basically, it's a weak curse technique. If the user doesn't have enough curse energy to amplify this ability, it's useless. But even though the full strength of Kyoto High's principle hasn't been fully revealed, the fact that he defeated Yaga, a veteran grade 1 sorcerer, who was even considered for special grade status, is enough for Gakuganji to be considered an elite sorcerer. And it's not just electric guitars that Grandpa can play. He can also use traditional instruments, like when he teamed up with Utahime Iori to buff Gojo's technique. Kyoto High student supervisor's solo, Forbidden Area, also works like Gakuganji's. The only difference is that she can buff the techniques of other sorcerers within the effective range of her abilities by 20%. Since she can only boost other abilities by doing a ritual dance, complete with music and hand signs, Utahime's technique also depends on the power level of the sorcerer she's boosting, right? Like if the user can't maximize their technique, a 20% boost ain't gonna make much of a difference. But this could be powerful, especially for stronger sorcerers like Gojo. Revving his hollow purple from 100 to 120 is a lot of damage. Let's just do some quick math. Imagine, power level of a sorcerer which is 100. You know, when they get a boost, it's only 20 more points on their power level. But let's say it's a sorcerer with a power level of 1000, like Gojo. Then that power boost is 200. Quick maths. Even though Utahime's innate ability basically acts only as support, it didn't stop her from reaching semi-grade 1 level. meaning she only needs to complete a solo mission to become a legit grade 1 sorcerer. But can she actually complete the mission with just a support type curse technique? If Utahime can buff curse techniques, Miguel on the other hand can debuff curses. And he can also boost his physical strength using his curse technique, Prayer Song. In chapter 255, it was mentioned that Miguel's innate technique is quite handy, but not exactly scary. According to Gojo, what's really scary is Miguel's build. Gojo even said there's a chance that Miguel could beat him in hand-to-hand combat. So Miguel probably has the fighting skills to go toe-to-toe with the powerful sorcerers, even Sukuna. But Prayer Song doesn't have any offensive abilities. Even though Sukuna became wary of this technique, it wasn't exactly a game changer. It's also unclear how much of a debuff it actually provides. When Miguel used it against Sukuna, it wasn't even noticeable. Because, Sukuna is just that overpowered. Think of it like this. If Sukuna is an Olympic-sized swimming pool, Miguel's debuff is just like taking a single bucket of water out. Still, Miguel's skill caught Gojo's attention, which is why Gojo recruited him to train Utah after the failed mission with Geto in the Night Parade of the 100 Demons. Now, did you know that even one of the big 3 families has a weak curse technique? The Zending clan's Blazing Courage, which was Ogi Zending's innate ability. This technique simply added flames to the user's weapon. Just a moment of silence for that technique. When Ogi's sword broke after a clash with Maki, he surprised his own daughter by extending his broken katana using flame-cursed energy. But that's really all there is to it. It didn't offer any extra buffs or special abilities, so Blazing Courage itself didn't seem all that impressive. Ogi Zending was recognized as a special grade 1 sorcerer not because of his curse technique, but for his overall skills as a powerful swordsman and sorcerer. Now that's definitely not enough though, against a fully awakened heavenly restriction. After all that talk, Ogi was easily and swiftly sliced by his own daughter. Probably the last curse technique you'd expect to qualify as weak as Tengen's immortality. I mean, who would want this kind of power, right? But the downside? Is it really worth it? Tengen's innate ability is that it didn't stop aging. Tengen just kept getting older until they became a walking thumb. Evolve and surpass humanity itself. The only redeeming quality of this curse technique was that Tengen was able to amass an enormous amount of knowledge in Jujutsu, making them a foundational figure in society. Tengen became so powerful that they turned into the cornerstone of the Jujutsu world, holding it together and even protecting the entire world with their unrivaled barrier techniques. But when their life was endangered, Tengen didn't have any means to protect themselves at all. Like they even asked for bodyguards because they knew that Kenjaku would come for them. Honestly, I think immortality turned out to be more of a burden than an asset for Tengen because if they continued to evolve, they could end up endangering the very world they were trying to protect. That's why every 500 years, Tengen has to reset their form by merging with the Star Plasma vessel. But when Tengen failed to merge with their intended vessel, as a result, Tengen continued to evolve to the point where they transcended being human and became more like a cursed spirit.